The stars looked cold and distant through the window of the passenger cabin. Ambassador Richard Blake sat quietly, watching space go by as his ship moved toward Kepler 7 station. He had made this kind of trip many times before, but today felt different. Today he was going to try to make peace with aliens who hated humans. Blake was 55 years old and had gray hair at his temples. He had been a diplomat for almost 30 years. He knew how to talk to people who did not want to listen. He knew how to find ways to solve problems when everyone said there was no solution. But the Zephyrians were not like any other species he had dealt with before. Captain Lisa Morgan walked into the cabin. She was the commander of the ship that was taking Blake to the peace talks. Her uniform was clean and pressed, and her brown hair was pulled back tight. She looked serious, like she always did when something important was happening. "We will reach the station in 2 hours, Ambassador," Morgan said. "The Zephyrian ships are already there, 3 of them, including a big warship." Blake nodded. He had expected this. The Zephyrians always brought more ships than they needed. It was their way of showing power. "Any problems so far?" "No, sir, but my crew is nervous. Jake Turner, my tactical officer, says the Zephyrian warship has enough weapons to destroy our ship 10 times over." Blake smiled a little. "That is exactly why we need these peace talks to work, Captain. If we keep fighting with the Zephyrians, many people will die." Morgan sat down across from Blake. "Sir, can I ask you something? Do you really think they want peace? My reports say they have been attacking our colonies for 2 years. They have taken prisoners. They have stolen our supplies. Why would they want to stop now?" Blake was quiet for a moment. He had read the same reports. The Zephyrians had been getting more aggressive lately. They claimed that humans were taking land that belonged to them. But the human colonies had been in the Centauri sector for 50 years. The Zephyrians had never said anything about it before. "I think they are testing us," Blake said finally. "They want to see if we will fight back or if we will give up. These peace talks are our chance to show them that we are strong enough to defend ourselves but smart enough to choose peace instead of war." The ship's communication system made a soft sound. Amy Rodriguez, the communications officer, spoke over the speakers. "Captain Morgan, please come to the bridge. We are getting a message from Kepler 7. Morgan stood up. "Excuse me, Ambassador. I will let you know if there are any problems." Blake watched her leave, then turned back to the window. He could see the space station now, a small point of light growing bigger as they got closer. Soon he would meet the Zephyrian leaders face to face. He had studied their culture for months, learning their customs and their language. He knew that. They respected strength and hated weakness. He also knew that they had never lost a war. But humans had something the Zephyrians did not understand. Humans could adapt. They could change their plans when things went wrong. They could work together, even when they disagreed about other things. Blake hoped that would be enough. The door opened again. This time it was Peter Grant, the cultural expert who was part of Blake's team. Grant was young, maybe 30 years old, with blonde hair and excited blue eyes. He was carrying a data pad and looked worried. "Ambassador, I have been reading more about Zephyrian customs. There is something I think you should know." Blake turned away from the window. "What is it?" "When Zephyrians meet for important talks, they sometimes have what they call a proof of strength ceremony. It is a way for each side to show that they are worthy of respect." "What kind of proof?" Grant looked at his data pad. Usually it is just a speech or a display of their best weapons. But sometimes... He stopped talking. "Sometimes what, Peter?" "Sometimes they challenge the other side to combat. Usually it is not serious. Usually no one gets hurt. But if they think the other side is weak..." Blake felt a cold feeling in his stomach. "How do we show them we are not weak without starting a fight?" "I do not know, sir. The records are not clear. Different Zephyrian groups do different things." Blake thought about this. He had come here to make peace, not to fight. But if the Zephyrians thought humans were weak, they would never agree to stop their attacks on human colonies. Captain Morgan's voice came over the communication system. "Ambassador Blake, please come to the bridge. We are approaching the station. Now." Blake stood up and straightened his diplomatic uniform. It was dark blue with small gold symbols that showed he spoke for all of humanity. He had worn it to dozens of peace talks before. He hoped he would live to wear it to many more. The bridge was busy when Blake arrived. Officers were working at their stations, monitoring the ship's systems and watching the space around them. Through the big window at the front of the bridge, Blake could see Kepler-7 station clearly now. It was huge, with long arms stretching out like a metal spider. Ships were docked at various ports along the arms. "There," Captain Morgan said, pointing to the biggest ship Blake had ever seen. It was dark gray and covered with weapon ports. "That is the Zephyrian dreadnought. The ship next to it is their diplomatic vessel." Jake Turner looked up from his station. "The dreadnought has locked weapons on us, Captain. They are not firing, but they are ready to." Blake was not surprised. "That is normal for them. They want us to know they are watching." Amy Rodriguez turned around in her chair. "Sir, we are getting a transmission from the station. The Galactic Council wants to welcome you. The Zephyrian delegation is also ready to meet." Blake took a deep breath. "Very well. Captain Morgan, take us in. It is time to see if we can make peace with the most dangerous aliens in the galaxy." As their ship moved toward the docking port, Blake looked at the Zephyrian warship one more time. Somewhere on that ship was War Commander Thexvar, the alien who would decide if these talks succeeded or failed. Blake had never met a Zephyrian before, but he had heard they were tall and strong with gray skin and sharp teeth. They were warriors who believed that only the strong deserved to live. But Blake believed something different. He believed that smart people could find ways to solve problems without killing each other. In a few hours he would find out if he was right. The news hit Earth like a thunderbolt. Within hours of Captain Morgan's transmission, every major news network was broadcasting the story. Ambassador Richard Blake, one of humanity's most respected diplomats, had been murdered during peace talks. The images from Kepler-7 station showed the brutal attack in shocking detail. President Karen Mitchell stood in the Oval Office, watching the news reports with a growing sense of anger. She was a tall woman with gray hair and steel blue eyes that had seen many crises during her time in office, but nothing had prepared her for this. "How many people saw the transmission?" she asked her chief of staff, who was standing nearby with a datapad. "Everyone, Madam President. The networks picked it up immediately. The footage of Blake's murder is being broadcast across all human colonies. People are calling for immediate retaliation." Mitchell turned away from the screen. She had known Richard Blake personally. He had been a good man who believed in solving problems through talking instead of fighting. His death was not just a political crisis, it was a personal loss. "Get me Admiral Parker," she said, "and call an emergency session of the Earth Defense Council. We need to meet within the hour." Admiral Ben Parker was the head of the Earth Defense Force, the military organization that protected human space. He was 60 years old with white hair and scars on his hands from his days as a ship captain. He had fought in 3 major conflicts and had never lost a battle. When the Defense Council met, the room was full of angry voices. General Linda Hayes from the Marines wanted to attack immediately. Secretary of Commerce Robert Clark argued for economic sanctions. Director of Intelligence Sam Chen presented evidence that the Zephyrian attack had been planned weeks in advance. "The intelligence is clear," Chen said, displaying holographic images for everyone to see. "The Zephyrians have been preparing for this moment. They have been moving ships into position near our colonies. They have been studying our defense patterns. This was not a random act of violence. This was the beginning of a war." Admiral Parker stood up and activated a large star map. Red dots showed Zephyrian ships, while blue dots showed human colonies and military bases. "Our intelligence suggests that the Zephyrians have been planning a major offensive for months. Blake's murder was meant to provoke us into making a mistake, or to scare us into backing down. What are our options?" President Mitchell asked. Parker pointed to different areas of the map. "Option 1. We file a formal protest with the Galactic Council and demand justice through diplomatic channels. This could take years, and there is no guarantee the Council will act." Several Council members shook their heads. The Galactic Council was known for being slow and ineffective when dealing with major conflicts. Option 2. We impose economic sanctions on all Zephyrian territories. We stop all trade, block their access to human technology and convince our allies to do the same. That might hurt them, said Secretary Clark. But it would also hurt our own economy, and the Zephyrians might just attack our colonies while we are trying to organize the sanctions. Parker nodded. Which brings us to option 3, direct military action. We hit them hard and fast before they can launch their planned offensive against our colonies. The room was quiet for a moment. Everyone knew that option 3 meant war, possibly the biggest war in human history. General Hayes leaned forward. Admiral, what kind of military force would we need for option 3? Parker touched a control and the star map changed to show fleet positions. To have any chance of success, we would need to mobilize everything we have. Every ship, every crew, every weapon. We are talking about the largest military operation in human history. President Mitchell thought about this. She had always preferred peace to war, but the images of Blake's murder were burned into her memory. More importantly, the intelligence. Reports showed that the Zephyrians were planning to attack human colonies whether Earth responded or not. Before she could speak, her aide brought her a message pad. Madam President, this just came in. It is from Dr. Claire Blake, the ambassador's widow. Mitchell read the message and felt her breath catch in her throat. She wants to address the council. She says her husband left something for us. 20. Minutes later, Dr. Claire Blake appeared on the main screen. She was a small woman with sad eyes, but her voice was strong and clear. Behind her on a table sat a sealed envelope with Richard Blake's handwriting on it. Members of the council, she began. My husband knew that these peace talks were dangerous. Before he left for Kepler 7, he recorded a message. He told me to give it to you only if something terrible happened to him. She opened the envelope and pulled out a small recording device. When she activated it, Richard Blake's voice filled the room. If you are hearing this message, then the peace talks have failed and I am probably dead. I want you to know that I believed in the possibility of peace with the Zephyrians until the very end. But I also want you to understand something important about their culture. Blake's recorded voice continued. The Zephyrians only respect strength. If they believe that humans are weak, they will continue to attack our colonies until we are all dead or enslaved. Any sign of weakness, any hesitation, any attempt to appear peaceful will be seen as an invitation to further aggression. President. Mitchell felt a chill run down her spine. Even in death, Blake was giving them crucial advice. I know that many of you prefer diplomatic solutions, the recording continued. So do I. But diplomacy only works when both sides want peace. The Zephyrians do not want peace, they want dominance. If they have killed me, it means they have decided that war is inevitable. Your only choice now is whether to fight on your terms or theirs. The recording ended, and the room was silent. Dr. Blake's image looked at each council member in turn. My husband died trying to make peace. Do not let his death be meaningless. Do what you must do to protect our people. Director Chen spoke first. Madam President, our latest intelligence confirms everything Ambassador Blake said in that recording. The Zephyrians have been moving ships into attack positions near 3 of our largest colonies. They plan to strike within 2 weeks. Admiral Parker added, if we are going to act, we need to act now. Every day we wait gives them more time to prepare. President Mitchell looked around the room at each member of the council. These were good people who had dedicated their lives to protecting humanity. She could see in their eyes that they had already made their decision. Admiral Parker, she said quietly, you have authorization for Operation Righteous Fury. Mobilize everything we have. Hit them with everything we have. Make sure the galaxy understands that murdering human diplomats has consequences. Parker stood up and saluted. Yes, Madam President. How far do you want us to go? Mitchell thought about Blake's murder, about the Zephyrian threats, about the human colonies that would be attacked if they did nothing. As far as necessary, Admiral. As far as necessary. Within hours, mobilization orders went out to every human military base in the galaxy. Ships that had been in maintenance were rushed back into service. Crews that had been on leave were recalled immediately. Weapons factories began working around the clock to produce missiles and energy weapons. The response was unlike anything in human history. Captain Morgan, still returning from Kepler-7, received orders to take command of a new heavy cruiser. Commander Alex Stone, a rising star in the fleet, was given his first major combat assignment. Captain Nicole Davis, known for her tactical brilliance, was put in charge of a special operations squadron, but the centerpiece of the operation was Admiral Parker's flagship, the UES Retribution. It was the largest ship humans had ever built, with enough firepower to destroy entire fleets. Parker had been saving it for exactly this kind of situation. As news of the mobilization spread, other alien species began to take notice. The peaceful Andromedans sent messages of support for human efforts to find justice. The trade-focused Helix Consortium quietly began moving their ships away from Zephyrian space. Even species that had no particular friendship with humans began to reconsider their relationships with the Zephyrian Empire. Director Chen met with Admiral Parker one last time before the fleet departed. "Ben, the Zephyrians have never lost a major war. Their military traditions go back thousands of years. They have conquered dozens of species." Parker looked at the star charts one more time. Over 300 human ships were now moving towards Zephyrian space, the largest fleet in human history. "Sam, the Zephyrians have never fought humans before. They think they know what we are capable of, but they are wrong. They killed Blake because they thought it would scare us. Instead, they just made us angry. And angry humans are dangerous." "Humans," Chen said with a slight smile. "Exactly," Parker replied. "The Zephyrians wanted a war. Now they are going to get one. But it is not going to be the war they expected." As the human fleet moved toward its destiny, President Mitchell addressed the people of Earth and all human colonies. Her message was broadcast across the galaxy, reaching billions of humans and countless alien observers. "My fellow humans," she said, "Ambassador Blake died trying to make peace. His death was not just an attack on one man, but an attack on everything we believe in. We believe in solving problems through discussion. We believe in treating all species with respect." 3 days had passed since the peace talks began. Ambassador Blake sat at a long table in the main conference room of Kepler-7 station. Across from him sat War Commander Thexvar, the leader of the Zephyrian delegation. Thexvar was everything Blake had expected and more. The alien stood over 7 feet tall, with gray skin that looked like stone and yellow eyes that never seemed to blink. His teeth were sharp, and when he spoke, his voice sounded like grinding metal. But Blake had learned something important during these 3 days. Behind all that scary appearance, Thexvar was smart. Very smart. "Your people build their colonies too fast," Thexvar said in his rough voice. "You do not ask permission. You do not check if the land belongs to someone else." Blake kept his voice calm and steady. "Our colonies in the Centauri sector have been there for 50 years. Your people never said anything about them before. We have records that show no one claimed that space when we arrived." "Records can be wrong," Thexvar replied. "My ancestors hunted in those systems long before your species learned to fly between stars." This was the same argument they had been having for 3 days. The Zephyrians claimed ancient rights to human colony worlds. The humans said they had settled empty space fairly. Neither side wanted to give up, but Blake thought he was making progress. Peter Grant, sitting next to Blake, passed him a data pad with new information. Blake read it quickly and felt a little hope. The other alien species in the Galactic Council were supporting the human position. The peaceful Andromedans and the trade-focused Helix Consortium both said that 50 years of human settlement should count for something. "War Commander," Blake said carefully, "what if we could find a way for both our peoples to benefit? The human colonies produce food and materials that your people need. Our trade records show that Zephyrian ships have bought human goods many times. Maybe we can work out a trade agreement instead of fighting over territory." Thexvar was quiet for a long moment. His yellow eyes stared at Blake without blinking, then slowly he nodded. "This might be possible, but my people will not be seen as weak. Any agreement must show that we are equals." Blake felt his heart beat faster. This was the first time Thexvar had agreed to anything. "Of course. Both of our peoples are strong and proud. We can write an agreement that shows respect for both sides." The other delegates in the room looked surprised. Council Leader Vexara, an Andromedan with blue skin and large dark eyes, leaned forward in her chair. "Are you saying that the Zephyrian Empire is willing to consider a peaceful solution?" "I am saying that we will consider it," Vexvar replied. "But there must be terms. The humans must pay for the use of Zephyrian hunting grounds. They must also limit how many new colonies they build." Blake thought quickly. The payment would be difficult, but not impossible. The limit on new colonies was harder, but maybe they could work something out. "We can discuss specific terms. I think we can find something that works for everyone." For the rest of the day, the delegates worked on details. Blake was tired, but he was also excited. Maybe these talks would actually succeed. Maybe they could avoid a war that would kill millions of people on both sides. That evening, the Galactic Council hosted a formal dinner for all the delegates. It was held in a large room with windows that looked out at the stars. The food was prepared to suit many different species, and there were drinks from a dozen different worlds. Blake wore his best diplomatic uniform and tried to look relaxed. Across the room, Thexvar stood with his officers, drinking something that looked like liquid metal. The Zephyrian leader kept looking at Blake, but his expression was unreadable. Helen Brooks, Blake's security chief, stood near the wall. She was a tough woman with short black hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. She had been worried about Blake's safety since they arrived at the station, but the talks had gone so well that even she seemed to be relaxing. Captain Morgan was also there, along with some of her officers. She had been monitoring the talks from her ship, ready to evacuate Blake if something went wrong. But tonight she was smiling and talking with the Andromedan delegates about trade routes. "Ladies and gentlemen," Council Leader Vexara said, standing up at the head table, "tonight we celebrate what may be a historic agreement. Ambassador Blake and War Commander Thexvar have shown us that even the most difficult problems can be solved through honest discussion." Everyone in the room clapped. Blake stood up and raised his glass. "To peace between all our peoples," he said. "To peace," the other delegates replied. Blake was about to drink when he noticed something strange. The Zephyrian servers, aliens wearing white uniforms who were bringing food and drinks to the tables, were all moving toward the exits. At the same time, the human servers were staying in the room. Helen Brooks noticed it too. Blake saw her hand, move toward her weapon, but before she could draw it, everything went wrong. Energy blasts filled the room. The human servers were not servers at all, but Zephyrian soldiers in disguise. Blake dove under the table as red beams of deadly light flew over his head. He could hear people screaming and the sound of chairs falling over. "Get down!" Helen Brooks shouted. She had her weapon out now and was firing back at the attackers, but there were too many of them, and they had planned this attack carefully. Blake crawled toward the wall, trying to stay low. He could see Captain Morgan across the room, pulling her communication device from her belt. She was trying to call her ship, but energy blasts were flying all around her. "Humans are weak," one of the disguised Zephyrians shouted in accented English. "Humans do not deserve to live in Zephyrian space." Blake reached the wall and tried to stand up. He had to get to the communication panel and call for help. But as he got to his feet, he felt something hot hit his back. Pain shot through his body and he fell to the floor. Helen Brooks saw Blake fall and tried to reach him. "Ambassador!" she yelled. But more energy blasts forced her to take cover behind an overturned table. Blake could not move. The energy weapon had hurt him badly and he could feel his strength leaving his body. Through the noise and confusion, he heard War Commander Thexvar's voice. "Attention all delegates," Thexvar said, his metal voice cutting through the chaos. "This attack was carried out by loyal Zephyrian warriors. Ambassador Blake's death is payment for 50 years of human invasion of our territory." Captain Morgan finally reached her communication device. "UES Defender, this is Morgan. Emergency evacuation. The ambassador is down. Repeat, the ambassador is down." On the bridge of the Defender, Tom Wright, the intelligence officer, was watching the security feeds from the station. He could see the attack happening in real time. "Captain, I'm detecting coded transmissions between the attackers and the Zephyrian dreadnought. This was planned." Amy Rodriguez was already working at her communication station. "I'm transmitting all our records back to Earth. If we don't make it out of here, at least they'll know what happened." Back in the dining room, the attack was almost over. Most of the disguised Zephyrian soldiers had escaped, leaving behind dead and wounded delegates from several species. Blake lay still on the floor, his diplomatic uniform torn and bloody. Helen. Brooks reached him first. She knelt down and checked for a pulse, but she already knew it was too late. "He's gone," she said quietly. Council leader Vexera was crying, her blue skin pale with shock. How could this happen? This was supposed to be a peace conference. War Commander Thexvar stood in the doorway, surrounded by his guards. His yellow eyes showed no emotion as he looked at Blake's body. The human expansion into Zephyrian territory has been an act of war for 50 years. Today, we finally responded. Let this be a warning to all humans. Stay in your own space, or face the consequences. Captain, Morgan managed to get close to Blake's body. She knelt down next to Helen Brooks and felt a cold anger growing in her chest. We have to get him out of here. We have to get everyone out of here. But Thexvar was not finished. Captain Morgan, he said, his voice echoing in the damaged room. You will take this message back to your people. The Zephyrian Empire does not make peace with insects, we crush them. Morgan stood up slowly. Her hand was on her weapon, but she knew that drawing it would only get more people killed. This was murder, she said. The whole galaxy will know what you did here. Good, Thexvar replied. Let them know. Let them all know what happens to those who challenge Zephyrian power. Within an hour, the human delegation was back on the Defender. Blake's body was in the medical bay, covered with a flag from Earth. Captain Morgan stood on the bridge looking at the Zephyrian dreadnought through the main screen. Orders, Captain? Jake Turner asked quietly. Morgan was quiet for a long moment. The Zephyrian ship could destroy the Defender easily, but running away felt wrong. Blake had died trying to make peace, and now he was dead because of Zephyrian treachery. Set course for Earth, she said finally. But first, I want a full scan of that dreadnought. I want to know everything about their weapons, their shields, and their weak points. Yes, ma'am, Turner replied. As the Defender turned away from Kepler 7 station, Amy Rodriguez finished transmitting her report to Earth. She had sent everything: video of the attack, recordings of Thexvar's threats, and complete technical data on the Zephyrian ships. The human fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of Zephyrian territory like a thunderstorm arriving on a clear day. Admiral Parker stood on the bridge of the UES Retribution, watching as over 300 ships took their positions in perfect formation. It was the most beautiful and terrifying sight he had ever seen. All ships report ready, Admiral, reported his communications officer. We have complete tactical surprise. The Zephyrians are not expecting us. Parker nodded. He had studied every available record of Zephyrian military tactics for weeks. The aliens were powerful and aggressive, but they were also predictable. They followed ancient traditions of warfare that had not changed in centuries. They expected their enemies to follow the same traditions, but humans had no such traditions. Human military doctrine was based on one simple idea: do whatever works. Target, HFY, Parker announced to the fleet. This is a Zephyrian mining world with a moderate defense force. We will use it to test our tactics and send a message to the Empire. HFY was a rocky planet covered with deep mines. The Zephyrians used it to extract rare metals needed for their warships. More importantly, intelligence reports suggested that over 2,000 human prisoners were being held there as slave workers. Captain Morgan, now commanding the heavy cruiser UES Vengeance, received her orders and smiled grimly. Tactical Officer, prepare for flanking maneuver Alpha 7. Yes, ma'am, replied her new tactical officer, Lieutenant Carl Brooks. All weapons charged and ready. Meanwhile, Commander Alex Stone prepared his destroyer squadron for what the humans called a wolf pack attack. His ships were small and fast, designed to hit hard and disappear before the enemy could respond. The Zephyrian defense of SciFiPrime was led by Sub-Commander Krelnax, a veteran warrior who had never lost a battle. His fleet consisted of 12 heavy cruisers and 1 battleship, arranged in the traditional Zephyrian defensive formation. Sub-Commander, reported his sensor operator. We are detecting human ships approaching the system. They appear to be requesting formal combat protocols. Krelnax was pleased. The humans were following proper military traditions just as he had expected. Very well. Signal them that we accept their challenge. Deploy our ships in honor formation. We will show these insects how real warriors fight. The Zephyrian ships moved into a straight line, facing the approaching human fleet. It was an ancient formation designed to demonstrate courage and strength. Each ship would engage the enemy in single combat, proving their individual worth. But the humans had no intention of fighting a traditional battle. All ships, Admiral Parker broadcast, execute Plan Chaos. The human fleet suddenly broke apart, scattering in all directions like water hitting a rock. The Zephyrians watched in confusion as their neat, organized enemy disappeared into dozens of smaller groups. Captain Morgan's cruiser swung wide around the planet, using the gravity well to increase speed. Her target was not the Zephyrian battle line, but their supply ships hiding behind the main fleet. Commander Stone's destroyers came at the Zephyrians from above and below, angles that the traditional formation could not defend against. They fired volleys of missiles, then disappeared behind asteroids before the aliens could return fire. What are they doing? Sub-Commander Krelnax demanded. This is not how space battles are fought. His weapons officer was equally confused.
Sir, they are attacking our supply ships instead of our main battle line. They are using hit-and-run tactics like pirates. Cowards, Krelnax snarled. Turn the fleet around. Protect the supply vessels.
But as soon as the Zephyrian ships began to turn, Admiral Parker's main force struck them from behind. The UES Retribution and its escort ships had been waiting for exactly this moment. The Zephyrian ships were powerful, but they were designed for frontal combat. Their rear shields were weaker, and their main weapons could not fire backward. In minutes, 3 Zephyrian cruisers were destroyed or crippled. Captain Morgan reached the supply ships and found more than she had expected. Admiral, we have found the human prisoners. They are being held on converted cargo ships with minimal security. Rescue them immediately, Parker ordered, and take any intelligence you can find. Morgan's boarding teams, led by Sergeant Mike Taylor, stormed the prison ships. The Zephyrian guards were completely unprepared for human close combat tactics. Within an hour, over 2,000 human prisoners were free. One of the rescued prisoners was Dr. Nancy White, a geologist who had been captured 6 months earlier. She was weak from poor food and hard work, but her mind was still sharp. Captain, she said to Morgan, I have been listening to the Zephyrian guards for months. They have been talking about something called Thanox Station. It is some kind of fortress where they are gathering their main fleet. Morgan immediately passed this information to Admiral Parker. The intelligence was exactly what they needed. Commander Stone's destroyers continued their Wolfpack attacks, striking Zephyrian ships and vanishing before the aliens could respond. The Zephyrians had never faced tactics like this. Their ancient battle formations were useless against enemies who refused to fight fair. Sub-Commander, his communications officer called out, the humans are jamming our communications. I cannot contact the other ships. Krelnax felt panic rising in his chest. His fleet was being destroyed piece by piece, and he could not even coordinate a proper response. All ships, retreat to the planet. We will make a final stand in orbit. But it was too late. The human fleet had surrounded SciFiPrime and escape was impossible. Within 6 hours, the entire Zephyrian defense force was either destroyed or captured. Admiral Parker stood in the ruins of the Zephyrian Command Center on SciFiPrime. The planet was now under human control, and the rescued prisoners were being treated in the medical bay of the Retribution. Casualty report, he requested. Minimal losses, sir, reported Captain Morgan. We lost 2 destroyers and suffered damage to 4 other ships. The Zephyrians lost everything. Parker nodded, but he was not celebrating yet. This had been just the first battle, and the Zephyrians would not make the same mistakes twice. Captain Nicole Davis arrived with her special operations team. She was a small woman with short red hair and green eyes that missed nothing. Her team had captured several Zephyrian officers during the battle. "Admiral, the prisoners are talking. It seems that Thanok Station is real, and it is exactly what we thought. The Zephyrians are gathering their entire remaining fleet there for a final battle." "How many ships?" Parker asked. "Over 500, sir. Maybe more. Every Zephyrian warship in this sector of the galaxy." Parker looked at the tactical display. His fleet had won a great victory, but they were still outnumbered almost 2-1. The Zephyrians would not be caught off guard again, but the rescued prisoners had provided more than just intelligence. Dr. White and the other scientists had been forced to work on Zephyrian technology for months. They had learned things about alien ships that no human had ever known before. "Admiral," Dr. White said during the debriefing, "the Zephyrian ships have a weakness. Their shields are designed to deflect energy weapons, like the ones most galactic species use. But they have never faced kinetic weapons like our railguns." This was exactly the kind of information Admiral Parker needed. "Can we exploit this weakness?" "Yes, sir. If we modify our weapons to fire solid projectiles instead of energy beams, we can punch right through their shields." Parker smiled for the first time since the battle began. "Get our engineers working on it immediately. We are going to give the Zephyrians another surprise." As the human fleet prepared for the next phase of the campaign, news of the victory at HFY spread throughout the galaxy. Other alien species watched in amazement as humans accomplished something no one thought possible. They had defeated a Zephyrian fleet in open combat. The peaceful Andromedans sent a message of congratulations. The trade-focused Helix Consortium quietly began offering supplies to the human fleet. Even species that had been neutral in the conflict began to reconsider their positions. But in the depths of space, at a massive fortress called Thanok Station, War Commander Thexvar was gathering the largest Zephyrian fleet in history. He had underestimated the humans once. He would not make that mistake again. "Bring me every ship we have," he ordered his subordinates. "Bring me every weapon, every warrior, every piece of technology the Empire possesses. The humans think they are clever, but they have never faced the full might of Zephyrian power." Admiral Parker knew that the real test was coming. HFY had been just a warm-up. The battle for Thanok Station would determine the fate of both species. "All ships, prepare for hyperspace jump," he ordered. "Destination, Thanok Station. It is time to finish what the Zephyrians started." As the human fleet disappeared into hyperspace, the galaxy held its breath. The largest space battle in galactic history was about to begin, and no one knew which side would survive. Thanok Station hung in space like a metal mountain. It was the largest military installation in Zephyrian space, built over centuries to be completely unbreakable. Around it, over 500 Zephyrian warships waited in perfect formation. This was everything the Empire had left. Admiral Parker stood on the bridge of the UES Retribution, studying the massive display screen. His fleet of 300 ships looked small compared to what they were facing, but he had learned something important from the battle at HFY. Numbers were not everything. Strategy mattered more. "War Commander Thexvar is commanding their defense personally," reported Intelligence Officer Linda Gray. "Our long-range sensors show his flagship positioned right at the center of their formation." Parker nodded. Thexvar was the alien who had ordered Ambassador Blake's murder. Today there would be justice. "All ships, this is Admiral Parker," he broadcast to the entire human fleet. "Today we fight for every human colony that has been attacked. We fight for every prisoner who has been enslaved. We fight for Ambassador Blake, who died trying to make peace. Show them what happens when you threaten humanity." The response came back from 300 ships at once. "Yes, sir." Parker had divided his fleet into 3 groups. The main force, led by the Retribution, would attack the station head-on. Captain Morgan's group would circle around and attack the power generators on the station's underside. Commander Stone's fast destroyers would target the communication arrays and cause confusion. War Commander Thexvar watched the approaching human fleet from his command ship. He had learned from the defeat at HFY and was ready this time. His ships were arranged in overlapping defensive rings around the station. No enemy could break through without facing fire from multiple directions. Sub-Commander Vexhar, he said to his second-in-command, the humans think they can repeat their earlier victory. They are wrong. Today we will show the galaxy that Zephyrian power cannot be challenged. The battle began when the human main force came within range of the outer defensive ring. Hundreds of energy weapons fired at once, lighting up space with deadly beams of light. The humans returned fire with their modified kinetic weapons, sending solid projectiles through space at incredible speed. To the Zephyrians' shock, the human weapons punched right through their shields. Ships that had seemed invincible suddenly found themselves taking damage from weapons they could not stop. Impossible, Thexvar snarled. Our shields should stop those primitive projectiles. Sir, his weapons officer reported, the human weapons are different from what we expected. They are not using energy beams like other galactic species. They are firing solid metal projectiles. While the main battle raged, Captain Morgan led her group on a dangerous journey around the edge of the combat zone. Her ships had to avoid both Zephyrian patrols and the massive weapons of Thanok Station itself. Captain, reported her navigation, officer, we are approaching the station's power generation complex. The area is heavily defended. Morgan could see the huge structures that powered the fortress. If they could destroy those, the station's shields and weapons would fail, but getting close enough would be almost impossible. All ships prepare for full attack run, she ordered. We get one chance at this. Morgan's ships dove toward the station like falling stars. Zephyrian defense guns fired at them from all directions, but the human ships were fast and unpredictable. They dodged and weaved through the deadly fire, getting closer to their target. Meanwhile, Commander Stone's destroyers were causing chaos among the Zephyrian communication ships. His fast vessels appeared and disappeared like ghosts, striking targets and vanishing before the aliens could respond. Stone to all destroyer groups, he broadcast on a secure channel. Target their command and control ships. If they cannot talk to each other, they cannot coordinate their defense. The Wolfpack tactics that had worked so well at HFY were even more effective here. The Zephyrian fleet was too large to change direction quickly, and their traditional formations became a weakness when they could not communicate properly. But the most important battle was happening on Thanok Station itself. Captain Nicole Davis led a boarding party of 200 human Marines directly onto the fortress. Their mission was to capture the command center and end Zephyrian resistance from within. Davis and her team had studied the station's layout for weeks using intelligence from rescued prisoners. They knew exactly where to go and how to get there. But they also knew that thousands of Zephyrian soldiers would try to stop them. The human Marines fought their way through narrow corridors filled with alien warriors. The Zephyrians were strong and fierce, but they had never faced human close combat tactics. The Marines used teamwork and advanced weapons to overcome enemies twice their size. Davis to all teams, she called over her radio as they reached the station's central core. We are at the command center. Prepare for final assault. The command center was a vast room filled with alien technology. At its center, War Commander Thexvar waited with his personal guards. The massive alien held a weapon in each hand, and his yellow eyes burned with hatred. Human insects, he growled as Davis and her Marines entered the room. You think you can defeat the Zephyrian Empire? We have conquered dozens of species. You are nothing special. Davis raised her weapon and looked directly into Thexvar's alien eyes. You made one big mistake, she said calmly. You killed our ambassador while he was trying to make peace. You thought that would scare us. Instead, it just made us angry. The fight that followed was brutal and short. Thexvar was strong, but Davis was fast and smart. When it was over, the alien commander lay dead on the floor of his own command center. Outside, Captain Morgan's attack on the power generators had succeeded. The massive structures exploded in sequence, sending waves of energy through the station. Without power, Thanok Station's shields failed and its weapons went silent. Admiral Parker saw the explosions and knew the moment had come. All ships, final assault, target the station's critical systems. The human fleet converged on the helpless fortress. Without shields or defensive weapons, Thanok Station was destroyed in minutes. The remaining Zephyrian ships, seeing their mighty fortress in ruins and their commander dead, began to surrender. Within hours, the battle was over. The Zephyrian Empire's military power was broken. Their fleets were destroyed or captured. Their commanders were dead or prisoners, and their people were ready to accept peace on human terms. Admiral Parker stood in the ruins of Thanok Station's command center, looking at Thexvar's body. Justice had been served, but the cost had been high. Thousands of humans and aliens had died in this war that never should have happened. "Admiral," Captain Davis reported, "we have secured the station. The remaining Zephyrian forces are requesting terms of surrender." Parker nodded. "Tell them they will be treated fairly, but the war is over. Their empire is finished." News of the victory spread across the galaxy faster than light. Every species in the Galactic Council received the reports within hours. The humans, who had been considered a minor power just weeks ago, had completely destroyed the mighty Zephyrian Empire. The Galactic Council called an emergency session. Council leader Vexara, the Andromedan diplomat, addressed the assembly with obvious nervousness. "The human victory has changed everything," she announced. "We must grant Earth a permanent seat on the Council and recognize their claims to all former Zephyrian territories." Other species that had watched the war from the sidelines now rushed to offer friendship to humanity. The trade-focused Helix Consortium proposed new economic agreements. Even species that had been hostile to humans suddenly became very polite. President Mitchell received the news of victory while standing in the same Oval Office where she had authorized the war. She felt relief, satisfaction, and sadness all at the same time. Blake's death had been avenged, but the cost in lives and resources had been enormous. "Madam President," her chief of staff said, "Admiral Parker is requesting permission to return to Earth. The fleet has accomplished its mission." Mitchell nodded. "Tell the Admiral that he and his people have done something remarkable. They have shown the galaxy that humanity will not be pushed around." A week later, Admiral Parker stood before a joint session of Congress to report on the war. The chamber was packed with representatives from every human colony and military installation. "Members of Congress," he began, "we went to war to seek justice for Ambassador Blake's murder. We found justice, but we found something else as well. We found out that humanity has the strength to defend itself against any threat." The applause was thunderous. But Parker was not finished. The Zephyrian Empire chose war over peace. They chose murder over diplomacy. They thought humans were weak because we preferred talking to fighting. They were wrong. We are not weak. We are simply smart enough to know that peace is better than war when peace is possible. He paused and looked directly at the cameras that were broadcasting his speech across human space. "But when peace is not possible, when our people are threatened, when our representatives are murdered, we will respond with all the force necessary to protect ourselves. Let every species in the galaxy understand this. Humanity wants peace, but we are fully prepared for war." The speech was broadcast throughout the galaxy, and every alien species heard the message clearly.